All right, geometry. We're talking about angle theorems. Some of you have already probably seen the first few, but these are all the theorems that we're dealing with for angles right now. So all right angles congruent. We can abbreviate this by just writing all right angles congruent like this, so we don't have to write as much. Or just right angles congruent. You don't really even have to have the all. But basically, what we're saying is if you have two right angles, you know these two things are right angles. Maybe they're given to you, maybe you have to find them. But if there's two right angles, you can say those are congruent. So in this case, angle A is congruent to angle Z because they're both right angles. Okay? And the reason I know that is because of this theorem. All right angles are congruent. Okay? So these are proofs where what we're doing is we've got the statements on one side, the reasons on the other. And we're trying to get to a certain goal. Okay? So, in this case, the vertical angles congruent theorem. Vert angles congruent. That's an abbreviation for this one. There's a few different vertical angles in this case. So like right here, 7 and 3 are opposite of each other. Those are congruent because they're vertical angles. So angle 7 is congruent to angle 3. How do I know that? Because all vertical angles are congruent. Another one we have, for instance, 2 and 6 are opposite of each other. Those are also congruent. Same reason. Angle 6 congruent to angle 2. Again, because they are vertical angles, and I know vertical angles are congruent. Now, another one in this case would be angle, here, let's use a different color for that. Another one would be angle 1 and this whole angle. Now, I can't call it 5 and 4 put together. I just use the letters, C, D, E. So, angle 1 congruent to angle C, D, E. Same reason. Vertical angles are congruent. Okay? And that's the theorem. So, on the next one, these are a little more challenging at times. Okay, supplementary angle congruent. Supplementary to the same angle are congruent. So what it's saying is, if two angles are supplementary to the same angle, then those two angles are congruent. So in this case, see how these two, so 1 and 2 are right next to each other and they create a line. So 1 is supplementary to 2. That's the definition of supplementary. Okay? Right here. And then we also have 2 and 3 are right next to each other and they create a line. So, same thing. 3 and 2 are supplementary by definition of supplementary. So, if they're supplementary to the same angle, then angle 1 and angle 3 have to be congruent. Okay? If they're supplementary to the same angle, they have to be congruent. And the abbreviation is supplements to the same angle are congruent. Okay? Again, that abbreviation is same angle congruent. Okay? So, we're going to skip to the same concept, but for complementary. So, same thing. It's complementary. Complements to the same angle are congruent. So, in this case, 1 is complementary to 2. 3 is complementary to 2. So, therefore, since they're both complementary to 2, 1 and 3 have to be the same. Okay? In that case, they were given to us. So, since they're both complementary to 2, angle 1 is congruent to angle 3 because complements to the same angle are congruent. Okay? So, our last ones are very similar to that concept. Okay, so for this it says supplements congruent angles are congruent. So if two things are supplementary to congruent angles, then those have to be congruent. So sup congruent angles, congruent, which seems kind of confusing, but look at what's given to us. 6 and 7 are congruent. Okay, I know 6 and 7 are the same. Now, what else do I know from the picture? Well, 7 and 8 are supplementary, and 5 and 6 are supplementary. Okay, so angle 5 supplementary to angle 6. Angle 7 is supplementary to angle 8. And both of those, I saw it in the picture. They're next to each other and they create a line. So that's the definition of supplementary angles. Okay. Now, if 6 and 7 are congruent and 5 and 8 are supplementary to those angles, then angle 5 and angle 8 have to be congruent as well, because they're supplement to congruent angles, and therefore they are congruent. Okay? So 6 and 7 we said were congruent. Let's say they're 30 degrees. So that would make 5 150 degrees and 8 150 degrees. They have to be congruent. Okay? So in the same way, complementary works the same way. So comp congruent angles congruent. If they're complementary to the congruent angles, then they are congruent. So look at our given. 2 and 4 are congruent, right? And it says that these two are complementary. These two are complementary. Well, if 2 and 4 are congruent, then don't these two have to be the same as well? 2 and 4 are congruent. So 1 and 3 must be congruent. And that is by complements to congruent angles are congruent. Okay? And that's our theorems. And again, we're going to get more and more practice with proofs in general. But those are our angle proofs. Okay? So got to practice those. Peace.